So every now and again, as a teacher, I will just like get a random message from a former student asking me some like economics or government question, right? Always, like years later. Cannon, I have a question. And I can always tell that they're arguing with somebody and they want to be right because I taught them to know what the fuck they're talking about. But the general question that they were asking was like, whose economy are we living with right now, right? Like, how long does it take for the economic policies of a president to actually like have effect in the economy? Because there's apparently a lot of fight over that because everybody slept through my fucking class. So I will explain to you, as I explained to them, kind of how this works, right? So the fiscal year ends on September 30th, which means the new fiscal year starts on October 1st. So a president comes into office in January, and that would mean that in normal circumstances, they would be operating under the budget passed by the previous president's Congress, right? And they would have to have figured out their policy agenda in time for it to take effect in October, right? So the idea is, and this was sort of like started with FDR, I guess a little bit, like the first 100 days of the presidency, right? Where you like decide to actually get shit done instead of just getting elected president and then doing whatever you always did. So I explained that like from the time a policy is passed through Congress, signed by the president, right? We have a law, wonderful. By the time that takes effect, assuming that all goes normal, like blah, 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 we live in the world's continuing resolution. But for the most part, this is apt for the conversation at hand, right? So a new budget comes into effect in October, and that is when you start the economic policies, right? So in this case, I do believe they were talking about like Donald Trump coming into office in 2017 and how the economy was good there because of Barack Obama's policies. And that is true. So he passes his tax cut. It goes into effect in the next fiscal year. And it would be about 6 months usually from the time it goes into effect for people to see like a real change in their like economic situation if they were paying close attention to it, right? But people's close attention varies, so generally it's about 12 to 18 months before the impacts are such that you've gotten accustomed to them to where you could recognize that they're better, right? They've been getting better, but you can notice now that they're not. Like when you break your leg and you go back to the doctor 3 weeks later, you're not in any pain, but you were in pain, but it went away, right? Like it with time, right? So the follow-up question from that was, I assume, about the AI crash, right? Which, side note, as a millennial, can we just say that it's so fun watching another one of these, right? Like the dot-com bubble, well, fine, we got over that. Just to have a housing bubble, super duper fun. So what do we get now? The AI bubble. Thanks. Back to the point at hand, the stock market doesn't work the same way that the economy works, which is why it's really frustrating sometimes because people will look to the stock market as a whether or not the economy is doing well. And while that's sort of true, it's not actually true because the only people that own stocks are like the people who already have money for whom the economy is not so much the impact on as much as the impact of. Which is a dickhead way of saying that like they usually create the economic conditions the rest of us live with. But that's a conversation for later. So the stock market is more reactive to current events, right? So Donald Trump announces he's passing tariffs. That indicates to businesses that their resource costs are about to go up. So they buy a bunch of shit right now to avoid paying the higher cost later, probably because they anticipate legal challenges that will eventually overturn the tariffs. So in the interim, they're trying to, make do. Hence the you didn't get a Christmas bonus. So the stock market crashed, not because the economy is bad, not because Joe Biden was bad and that's what made the stock market crash. It's because China released their own ChatGPT and then told us it costs $6 million. While Elon Musk is sitting in the ear of the president telling him it's worth 450 billion, at least his chunk of it. And that's how bubbles pop, right? Something will always inevitably point to the fact that the balloon is overinflated, at which point it pops. But this time it was like China poking us, which is a fun new twist. So that was a roundabout and very complicated way of answering, yes, the stock market reacts to daily events and economic developments and expectations in those kind of ways. But that's not the same thing as the economy, which measures like inflation, unemployment, GDP per capita, or like debt to revenue ratios, like those kind of boring number things. And that is why it's kind of so frustrating to try and explain economic policy to people, because the stock market and the economy have kind of been conflated in the mind of the American people ever since, I will let you guess. So keep the video under 3 minutes turned into a little over 5. If you're still here, bless you. I'm sorry.